Donc nous abordons maintenant, je vais démarrer le programme de cet après-midi. Nous abordons donc la dernière ligne droite, dernier virage de notre forum, dernier après-midi, donc avec au programme 2 interventions et l'allocution de clôture. La première intervention sera faite par Monsieur Théoneste, donc de Smart Africa, Théoneste Ngouron-Sanga, qui est chef de projet protection des données personnelles et cybersécurité à Smart Africa. Il va nous entretenir donc sur les lignes directrices de Smart Africa en matière de protection des données personnelles. Donc je vais demander à Monsieur Théoneste de me rejoindre ici même. If you could please join me, Mr. Théoneste, for your presentation. Over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to have to try to keep that within 30 minutes, if possible.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, thank you, Yvan. So as he just said, my name is Théoneste Ngouron-Sanga. I'm the project manager responsible for cybersecurity and data privacy at Smart Africa. So before I start my presentation about the data protection and privacy guidelines for member states, I would like to share with you a little bit about Smart Africa. So Smart Africa Alliance is a bold and innovative commitment from African heads of states and governments to accelerate sustainable socio-economic development on the African continent, with the vision of transforming Africa into single digital market by 2030. And as of today, the Smart Africa Alliance membership includes 32 member states that represent 850 million people, as well as international partner organizations, including the African Union Commission, International Telecommunications Union, ITU, among others, who sit at the steering committee. And not only the partners, but also the international private sector members. So that's a little bit about Smart Africa. Allow me now to start the presentation. So we are going to focus on those 3 things. I will share a little bit about the project summary. Then I will share the report on harmonization challenges in data protection and privacy. Third, I will share the technical guidelines for data protection authorities. Lastly, we will look at the recommendations on harmonization mechanism in DPP. This study or these guidelines on data protection and privacy is the result of a collaboration between Smart Africa as the initiator, the government of the Republic of Senegal as the flagship country, represented by CDP Senegal, Commission des données personnelles, as well as Agence Française de Développement. And the members, not only those partners, but also the members of the Smart Africa DPP working group from both the public and private sectors, as well as partners. I'm very sure today we are with those working group members. I want to see, by show of hand, those who participated in one or two meetings of this project. Working group members who are here. I can see Seni, Madame Marguerite. Ouais. President Poku and Madame Awa. So I'm very sure, as well as online, we have many working group members. So this was the collaboration between this institution and the working group members. So before I take you through the document, let me show you the timeline or the history of this project. We started back in 2020 with phase 1 of concept note. Then March 2021, the dedicated project manager was hired for this project. In 2021, April, we had the kickoff meeting for this project. Then after that kickoff meeting, we had 2 working group meetings. In July, we had the consulting firm was hired, and we had brainstorming workshop in September last year, but between July and September, we had the 3 working group meetings with the consultant. After the brainstorming workshop, we had 21st subgroup meetings, and we had this in only 3 months. And in January this year, we had validation workshop when this draft document was presented to the stakeholders. And last month in February, this draft document was presented during the CMICT, the Council of ICT Ministers, and this was the history of this project. And as we talk today, it's been almost 2 years that we have been working on these guidelines. Next steps, we are working on dissemination activities where we expect that these guidelines are going to be approved. And tomorrow, one of the follow-up activities, follow-up project, there will be an MOU between Smart Africa and NADPA that is going to be signed. So this was just to show you how this was done to get these guidelines for member states. Now, let's dive into the parts of these guidelines. This guidelines document has 3 parts. The first one is harmonization challenges in data protection and privacy. And the second one is technical guidelines for data protection authorities. The last one is recommendations on harmonization mechanism in data protection and privacy. And the final guidelines document is intended to guide all stakeholders on data protection and privacy matters in the Smart Africa member states, and it will serve as an inspiration to African continent. Now, let's look at the first section of this document. The harmonization challenges has 4 parts. We talk about the DPP legislations in Africa, about the commonalities and divergences, and we highlight the fundamental challenges, political challenges, operational challenges. So some of the commonalities and divergences that we see in Africa in the DPP ecosystem is that all frameworks try to give effect to internationally accepted principles by highlighting the rights of the data subject, as well as most of them set the stage for the creation of data protection authorities. For the divergences, this study showed that the frameworks talk about the data protection authorities. Some are not clear on the exact power that those data protection authorities have to have. Let me run quickly. So now we are going to see in numbers the findings throughout the harmonization challenges. So out of 54 countries in Africa, the African countries with Data Protection Act or law are only 32. And 6 countries are in the process of developing a draft. And 16 countries have no data protection law. So, and when we look at the most common rights of data subject explicitly written into data protection law, out of 30 countries highlight the right to access, and 29 put the provision for right of ratification, and only 27 show the right to object. Most common words and group of words in the definition of sensitive data in data protection legislation, and this is out of 28 countries. 28 countries consider political and health data as defined as sensitive. And 26 countries consider religious data as sensitive. There are also life, union, and region cases. So, about the exceptions to privacy rights, out of 31 countries, only 22 countries consider public safety as exception to privacy rights. And when it comes to national security, 21 countries consider national security as exception to private rights. And only 6 countries consider law enforcement. I mean, 6 countries say that law enforcement is not commonly seen as an exceptional. Legal basis for processing of data protection. Out of 31 countries, 30 countries put in place the provision for consent as the legal basis for processing of personal data. 29 countries put in place provision for contract with the data subject as not only data subject, but also vital interests of data subject as the legal basis. And 28 countries put in place provisions for other legal obligations, such as public interest and so on. So, as you all know, the data protection laws require the data controllers and data processors to get registered. So 14 countries require processing upon authorization. So they say that before processing, you need to get authorization. 14 countries again require processing upon notification. When you want to notify the breach or any other thing, you need to get registered. And 27 countries do not require any communication to the data protection authorities. So, out of 31 countries, notification of breach requirements in the DPP laws, only 13 countries have provision for data processors and controllers to should have obligation to notify the data protection authority immediately after there is a breach. And 7 countries, in the 7 countries data protection laws, data processors and controllers have obligation to notify the data subject. And only 18 countries have no provision for notification. Like they say that notification is not required when there is a breach in the data, in the personal data. So about the retention periods and storage limitation prior to notification obligation, out of 31 countries, only 17 countries have obligation to notify, have the laws that have provision to set up a obligation to notify the retention period of both to data protection authority and to the data subject. And 13 countries have the obligation to notify the retention period to only the data protection authorities. And in our study, we found out that only 6 countries have the obligation to notify retention period only to the data subject. And out of 31 countries, the number of countries with data protection authorities are 24. So 24 African countries have established data protection authorities. We have seen that we have 32 data protection laws so far, and out of 32, only 24 countries have established data protection authorities. And out of those 24, only 15 are independent, and 9 are ministry-based data protection authorities. 7 countries have DDP, data protection and privacy law, but have not set up a data protection authority yet. Retention period and storage limitation basis for the further retention of personal data. Out of 31 countries, only 22 countries consider historical, statistical, and research purposes as a basis for the retention of personal data. Only 6 countries consider the retention and storage limitation as for the lawful purposes. Lawful purposes is considered as the basis, and 4 countries for legitimate interest or as a basis for retention and storage limitation. The most common mandates held by the data protection authorities in the countries with data protection and privacy legislation, out of 31 countries, only 27 countries have the provision in their laws to receive and respond to complaints. And 25 countries have the mandates to monitor and enforce the law and act on complaints. And 24 countries have the mandate to provide the public information and promote public awareness. And about the powers held by the data protection and data protection authorities, out of 31 countries, only 28 countries have the power to impose sanctions, and 23 countries regulate aspects of the law. These are the powers, and only 19 countries have the power to advise administrative measures. So for the legal basis for cross-border transfer of personal data, out of 30 countries with the DDP data protection and privacy law that the study was conducted, only 30 countries consider the adequate level of protection as legal basis for cross-border transfers of personal data in their laws. And all 30 countries, if the adequate level of protection criteria cannot be fulfilled, then they proceed with other legal basis for cross-border transfers. So this was one of the answers to the question during the survey that was conducted. The question was, in your view, what are the most important hurdles or issues towards successful implementation of data protection and privacy legislation in your country? And 17 participants responded, and only 13, which is 76% of the survey participants, they said the lack of awareness or knowledge of the public is seen as the most important problem towards the successful implementation of the data protection and privacy legislation. And 11 said that, out of 17, which is 65%, said that inadequate technical capacities and skills in the data protection authorities is the issue towards successful implementation. So these were the takeaways for the harmonization challenges, the report on harmonization challenges. We recommend that African countries cooperate on data protection and privacy on the basis of shared principles. until common standards such as the Malabo Convention is signed and ratified across Africa. So as long as it's not yet in force, African countries can be cooperate on the basis of shared principles. Another thing is these shared principles and the regulatory goals can be combined with technical guidelines regarding the implementation. They can also focus on the harmonization mechanism, and those harmonization mechanisms should be based on identification and communication of shared interest, and as well as mutual recognition of the commonalities I highlighted when I started. Now, this was the first part of the guidelines document about the harmonization challenges. Now, for the guidelines, technical guidelines, these guidelines has the purpose to support the data protection authorities who wish to adopt or update the data protection policies. The technical guidelines for DPAs have the legal basis, the concept and the definition first, legal basis, rules for data storage, rights for data subject, cross-border data transfers, and data protection authorities. So this section highlights the best practice when you look at the Malabo Convention, international instruments, as well as the recommendation from the working group members. For instance, here at the consent as a legal basis, both Malabo Convention and the GDPR state that consent of the data subject is a legal basis for processing of personal data. And the working group concluded that one of the most important aspects of legal basis is utilizing a legal basis that correctly corresponds to the purposes of data collection, processing, and storage. And when it comes to rules for storage and processing, it starts by selecting the purposes, determination of the legal basis, then which lead to rights of data subject, retention of retention time, and storage period. Now, let's look at the recommendations on harmonization mechanism, the third section in the guidelines document. These recommendations on harmonization and collaboration mechanism are addressed to the governments and the policymakers, data protection authorities, data controllers and processors, data subject means citizens, and multi-stakeholders. So these are the recommendations to the governments and the policymakers. So governments and policymakers should promote data protection and privacy harmonization with the following harmonization mechanism steps. The first one is to focus on identification and communication of shared interest. Second, recognition of and pursuit of shared principles. Third, mutual recognition of the commonalities of data protection and privacy legislation in Africa. The government should take steps to enable financially strong and independent data protection authorities. And another recommendation is that government should work together with the civil society on applicable areas. And government and public servants should comply to the applicable laws and regulation and stay with the predetermined boundaries without changing the scope in the data laws. These are the recommendations to the data protection authorities. The DPAs should be sustainably independent protectors of data subject. Okay, thank you. So they should know that they are the protectors of data subject because the data that are collected and processed are from the data subject. The DPAs should have independence as well as essential mandate and power to ensure effective enforcement. DPA should communicate to the manner that is fit into the laws. DPA should treat all businesses objectively and transparently and fairly. They should sync with international and regional best practice, and always they should highlight the economic benefit of region integration and harmonization. DPAs should always focus their resources on areas where they can create the biggest positive impact and prevent the most negative incidents. And DPAs are strongly encouraged to participate in continental networks and peer learning programs such as NADPA. Let me go quickly. For the data controllers and processors, they should recognize and embrace the reality that data protection and privacy will require investment. They should comply with laws and legislation and regulations put in place by DPAs. They should recognize that national and regional variability is inevitable and prepare robust systems to accommodate those variability and uncertainty. Data controllers and processors should work with authorities to improve public awareness, capacity building, and anticipate and planning for the future. For the data subject, citizens, they should stay informed on data protection and privacy principles, and government should make sure that the awareness materials are in local languages so that they can be communicated in understandable manner. And citizens should always know that it's also their responsibility, not only the government, but also they should have personal responsibility on digital education when it's needed. And citizens should utilize the civil society organization to get information. And lastly, citizens should contact the selected representative when they need anything related to DPP. Lastly, for the multi-stakeholder, we recommend that they should actively build on the existing regional and Pan-African initiatives for cooperation, such as Smart Africa Alliance, African Union, Network of African Data Protection Authorities, while they are seeking avenues for cooperation. And we recommend that they should promote the development of professionals within the data protection and privacy sphere. Multi-stakeholders or partners who interact with the citizen, they should promote the principle of accountability and transparency. And they should put more emphasis on cyber security practices. So in the morning, they talked about it, that cybersecurity is very needed in the matters related to data protection. And lastly, they should collaborate on the development of African training and certification program while focusing on the program of awareness and capacity building. So the way forward, we want to inter-organization or international level to focus on shared legal, these three building blocks: shared legal structure, hierarchy of governance, and shared interest. And African countries, from governments to private sector to citizen, have shared interest in a harmonized data protection and privacy landscape in Africa. So this is the last slide, and the way forward about the shared interest that we should all focus on in a harmonized data protection and privacy landscape in Africa. These are the shared interests that we should be focusing on: single digital market in Africa, trusted circulation of data, promotion of digital trade, participation in global digital economy, participation in global dialogue, impact of trust on local economies, ease of business, and foreign direct investment. These are the shared interests that we should focus on while we are harmonizing our data protection and privacy landscape in Africa. So the follow-up project for this Smart Africa Alliance, Smart Africa Secretariat will launch several calls for expression of interest to assist member states on demand basis, together with African Task Force of Experts, first to draft or update national legal frameworks if they request this. Second, to establish roadmaps and capacity building measures for data protection and data protection authorities. And lastly, to establish mutual recognition mechanism and agreement. So in summary, these are the three sections of these guidelines that we developed together with data protection authorities under the leadership of the Republic of Senegal. And this is still a draft, and when it will be approved, it will be shared to everyone. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Théoneste. Thank you very much for sharing these very insightful guidelines. Merci pour avoir partagé avec nous ces lignes directrices. Effectivement, il faut rappeler que ces lignes directrices ont été élaborées dans un cadre d'un groupe de travail avec le soutien de Smart Africa et sous le leadership du Sénégal, représenté effectivement par le CDP. Et en partenariat avec NATPA, qui est le réseau africain de la protection des données personnelles. Voilà, sans plus tarder, je pense que nous allons essayer d'accélérer un petit peu notre marche vers la fin de ce forum. Alors, je vais demander à le prochain intervenant de me rejoindre ici même à ce pupitre. Je vais appeler Monsieur Mamoudou Niane, qui est le secrétaire permanent du CDP Sénégal, qui va nous rejoindre donc pour présenter une synthèse générale des travaux de la journée avant de passer à l'allocution de clôture. Merci. Pardon, allez-y. Dans le programme ne permet pas de faire de commentaires, mais je pense que si vous avez un commentaire, vu vu que la parole, avec la permission du Présidium, si vous voulez bien peut-être éventuellement laisser M. Omar parler. Mais vraiment, il faut garder votre commentaire vraiment succinct, s'il vous plaît. Donc, je peux avoir un micro, s'il vous plaît, pour M. Omar.
Merci pour m'avoir permis de réagir. Parce que j'interviens là en tant que CNDP Maroc, pas en tant que secrétaire permanent. Donc, pour que les choses soient très claires. C'est bien comme ça?
Oui.
Donc, je disais que j'intervenais ici en tant que CNDP Maroc et pas du tout en tant que secrétariat permanent. Ce que je voudrais dire, c'est que ce travail qui a été élaboré est très lourd, très consistant, très structuré. Et il a une légitimité qui est celle d'avoir été travaillé dans le cadre du groupe de travail présidé par le Sénégal avec d'autres collègues du réseau africain. Mais je pense qu'à la veille de la signature de ce grand MOU qu'on va signer le réseau et Smart Africa demain, il faudrait peut-être considérer que ce n'est pas des guidelines, mais c'est un projet avancé de guidelines. Pourquoi je dis ça? Parce que je pense qu'il faut qu'on fasse une consultation exhaustive des autorités pour enrichir ces guidelines à partir de l'expérience terrain. Parce que là, on sent qu'il y a du travail, mais il faut s'assurer que l'expérience terrain des différentes autorités vient s'inscrire dans cette philosophie-là. La philosophie n'est pas contestée, n'est pas contestable. C'est plus le statut du document qu'il faudrait peut-être mettre en mode draft ou projet ou quelque chose, le temps que nos groupes de travail mutuels, c'est-à-dire de Smart Africa et du réseau africain, puissent travailler pour en faire un document finalisé avec un vrai statut de guidelines. Merci.
Très bien. Vous voulez intervenir peut-être, madame? Juste avant que vous interveniez, je pense que ce message-là, il a été déjà mentionné par mon collègue Théoneste. Il a bien effectivement dit qu'il s'agit d'un draft, il ne s'agit pas de guidelines définitives. Donc juste pour recadrer un petit peu, effectivement. Mais je laisse quand même la parole à madame Awendia qui voulait dire quelque chose.
Merci beaucoup, Yvan. Je voulais juste dire à mon ami et frère Omar qu'en réalité, ce travail, il faut le saluer d'ailleurs comme tel, est une initiative de Smart Africa. Et une initiative qu'il faut louer à mains égards. Je pense qu'effectivement, Smart Africa a eu une initiative excellente. Et mieux encore, Smart Africa a pensé à inclure à ce travail une panoplie d'acteurs, qui sont la société civile, les privés, mais également les autorités de protection. Maintenant, il faut que nous sachions, nous, autorités de protection, ce que nous voulons. Si on veut que le réseau soit notre voix, on ne peut pas dire notre voix, mais en même temps, on veut avoir une voix à chacun de individuel, autorité par autorité. Omar, je pense que ça, c'est un débat que peut-être qu'on ne doit même pas avoir ici, mais simplement, Attends. Parce que lorsqu'on nous avons fait ce travail, le réseau était impliqué à ce travail. Je ne suis pas là pour défendre Smart Africa, mais je suis là pour défendre un principe de travail que nous avons eu. Depuis le début, et Thelma est témoin, j'ai dit il faut intégrer le réseau à ce travail. Et le réseau a été impliqué. Marguerite est témoin à cela. Donc, le réseau a été impliqué dès le début. Et lorsque le réseau est impliqué, alors chacun d'entre nous, autorité de protection, nous sommes impliqués. Donc, on ne peut pas dire le réseau portera notre parole et nous acceptons la parole que porte le réseau et dire en même temps, il faut que chacun d'entre nous, nous regardions, nous consultions, nous donnons... Non, parce que quand même, un travail, il doit être fait par un groupe. Tout le monde ne peut pas faire un même travail. Maintenant, il est normal que lorsque ce travail sera validé par les chefs d'État, lorsqu'on leur aura soumis ce travail, il est normal que maintenant, le réseau, à travers son Assemblée générale, donne ce travail-là à tous les membres et que chacun ait la latitude de le regarder et s'il le faut d'avoir des amendements, des commentaires et ceci et cela. Et à ce moment, il nous revient à nous, autorités de protection, chargées de mettre en œuvre. Parce que c'est cela le problème. Si nous avons été impliqués, c'est parce que nous sommes importants dans la mise en œuvre de ce travail. Chargés de mettre en œuvre, si nous avons des choses à régler, nous les réglerons avec Smart Africa. Mais on ne peut pas dire aujourd'hui qu'il faut bloquer ce travail en attendant que chacun d'entre nous, nous puissions faire de commentaires. Ça, à mon avis, ce n'est pas juste.
Parce que c'est pas... C'est pas ce qui a été dit. Ce qui a été dit, j'ai commencé par dire que c'est un travail lourd, monstre, donc la reconnaissance du travail, elle est là. Ce que j'ai dit, c'est qu'avant peut-être d'aller le présenter au chef d'État, il vaudrait mieux le faire valider en assemblée générale du réseau. Et c'est le mécanisme de base de tout fonctionnement.
Okay, I'll just put a piece. This afternoon, I've had a discussion with Thelma on this, and we have agreed that the network will now adopt this document, and then from this level, we will look at it and then promote it within the membership, and have it. It's better than starting from scratch anything at all. So we will adopt these network guidelines as our work and work from here until we can finalize it. And I think this should be sufficient for the MOU agreement that we are now aligning our work with Smart Africa. Things haven't gone as we would all expect in the past, but it's onwards and upwards. We are progressive thinkers. We've decided to now align our work. So from this stage on, we adopt these guidelines, work with it within our membership, finalize it, and then promote it. And that is what I have agreed with Smart Africa, and I think that's acceptable. So this is why we took time to say to TNS to refer to it as a draft document. You know, Thelma sent you a note. So we can't call it a final document yet, and I agree that the network needs the opportunity to really get into it with our members. So it's a draft document that I'm adopting on behalf of all the NATPA members for us to now take it home, look at it, work with Smart Africa to finalize. Madame Pansy, please.
Moi, je dis que je ne suis pas d'accord sur le principe avec cette façon de faire. Puisque je dis que lorsque nous avons validé ce dossier, ce document en groupe de travail, le réseau était présent. Donc moi, je veux savoir en quelle qualité est-ce que le réseau était présent. Donc je dis que je ne suis pas d'accord avec cette méthode.
Pansy.
Make a suggestion. I think this is our internal issues as the network. Why don't we ask the meeting to proceed and we can talk about these issues in the network? Can I make that proposal? Thank you.
Très bien, merci. Je pense que effectivement nous allons progresser. Cette conversation va effectivement pouvoir se tenir dans d'autres lieux.